Welcome back, everyone. We're taking a deep dive into U.S. presidential inaugurations today.
Yeah, those grand ceremonies full of tradition.
And maybe a few things you didn't know.
Oh, definitely. We've got some news articles here with some pretty fascinating trivia, some interesting behind-the-scenes stuff.
So get ready for top hats.
Snowstorms.
Even a possible president for a day.
It's a lot more than just the swearing-in ceremony.
It's like a snapshot of America at that moment.
A glimpse into history.
Speaking of history, let's start with the oath, those 35 words.
Every president utters.
Yeah, right there in Article 2 of the Constitution.
You'd think it'd be pretty straightforward, but there's this story about Franklin Pierce back in 1853.
Oh, what happened?
He's the only president to ever affirm the oath instead of swear it.
Huh. Is there a reason why? I mean, the Constitution allows for both, right?
Right, but it's never been totally clear why he chose to affirm.
Interesting.
Some historians think maybe it was his religious beliefs.
Or maybe the political climate at the time. Who knows?
Makes you wonder what was going through his head as he stood there.
Had to lead the country, yeah.
Big moment.
And speaking of things that aren't always routine, the date and location. Seems like Inauguration Day has always been on January 20th, but...
Not even close. It wasn't until 1933 with that 20th Amendment.
Ah, so that's when they changed it from March 4th?
Yep. Before that, it was a way longer wait for the outgoing president.
Must have been awkward sometimes.
I'd imagine.
And imagine the first inauguration, George Washington's trip from Virginia to New York City.
Weeks. No jets back then.
Talk about travel delays. It pushed the inauguration all the way to April 30th in 1789.
Totally different world back then.
And get this, Washington is the only president sworn in two different cities, New York City and Philly.
Shows you how the nation's capital was still a work in progress.
Everything was brand new.
Then, as the country grew, inaugurations got more about the spectacle.
Oh yeah, the big show.
Speaking of big, we've got some record-breaking moments.
We were just talking about Washington. He also gave the shortest inaugural address.
Just 135 words.
Straight to the point.
Totally. And on the other side, you've got William Henry Harrison in 1841 with the longest address ever.
How long are we talking?
Over 8,000 words.
No way.
2 hours to deliver it.
Whoa, what happened after that?
Sadly, he caught pneumonia, died a month later.
Oh, wow. So shortest presidency ever.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even with all the celebrations...
Life can change pretty quickly.
True. Now for some groundbreaking firsts.
Oh, let's hear them.
Lincoln's second inauguration, 1865, really stands out.
Why's that?
First time Black Americans were in the inaugural parade.
Wow, right after the Civil War.
A big step forward.
Huge. And of course, Obama's 2008 inauguration.
Biggest crowd in D.C. history, 1.8 million people.
Hard to top that.
Symbol of hope.
And don't forget the behind-the-scenes firsts, like Judge Sarah Hughes.
First woman to swear in a president.
On Air Force One, right after JFK was assassinated.
Talk about a high-pressure situation. Then technology starts changing how everyone experiences these events.
Oh yeah, the impact of technology. It's wild to see how it all started.
From the first photo in 1857
to that first live internet broadcast in 97, everything changed.
Brings those moments closer to everyone.
And now who knows what the future holds for inaugurations.
VR holograms.
Pretty crazy to think about. But for now, let's step back in time, talk about fashion.
Oh, you mean like George Washington's brown suit?
Yeah, for his first inauguration.
Didn't want to look like a king, you know? He wanted to be a servant of the people.
And then there's the top hat.
Classic look. But JFK was the last one to wear it to his inauguration.
Really?
He did take it off for the oath, though.
Oh.
After him, LBJ and Carter, they went for business suits.
More modern.
Maybe a less formal approach.
Fashion always reflects the times, right?
Totally. And you know what else can change in an instant?
I think I know where you're going with this.
The weather.
Especially in D.C.
Reagan's 2 inaugurations are a perfect example.
What happened?
His first one, in 81, was the warmest ever, 55 degrees.
Nice.
But his second one, 85, was the coldest ever, only 7 degrees.
Brr.
They had to cancel the parade.
You never know what Mother Nature will throw at you.
Speaking of weather, FDR's second inauguration, 1937, was the wettest ever.
Raining cats and dogs.
But FDR insisted on riding back to the White House in an open car. Soaked.
That's dedication.
Let's not forget JFK in 61, the night before.
What happened?
8 inches of snow in D.C. Imagine trying to clear all that for the inauguration.
Logistical nightmare.
Definitely. Now let's shift gears a bit.
Oh, where are we headed?
Let's talk about Trump, specifically his plans for day one.
Now it's getting interesting.
He had all these executive orders ready to go.
Right, to make some big changes.
And Executive orders, they're powerful.
Remind us how they work.
They're presidential directives. They have the force of law.
So like bypassing Congress.
Exactly. No need for their approval.
Makes things happen faster.
For better or worse.
And from what we've read, Trump was ready to use them.
He wasn't messing around.
He had a whole bunch lined up covering all sorts of hot-button issues.
Immigration, economy, climate change, even the Capitol riot.
Ambitious, to say the least.
Definitely. Let's start with immigration. He wanted to bring back some of his earlier policies.
Oh, like what?
Remain in Mexico, for example.
Oh, right. That one sparked a lot of debate.
Requiring asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their cases are processed here.
I remember lots of human rights concerns.
And legal challenges, too.
And he also wanted to do more on border security.
Though the details weren't totally clear in these plans.
But definitely a focus for him.
He even talked about ending birthright citizenship.
Whoa, that's a huge change.
Legally and politically, massive undertaking.
Seems like he wanted to shake things up from the start.
For sure.
Yeah.
And on the economy. America first, all the way.
I remember those campaign slogans.
And his executive orders were aimed at protecting American jobs and businesses.
Tariffs, right. He loved those.
Especially on goods from China.
Lots of economists weren't fans of that approach.
They worried about the impact on American consumers.
But Trump saw it as leveling the playing field.
Bringing back manufacturing jobs.
Part of his populist appeal.
He was fighting for the average worker.
At least that's how he framed it.
Oh, and there's that whole Bitcoin thing.
The what?
He was thinking about creating a federal stockpile of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Seriously.
It was a sign of the times. Crypto was getting big.
Still pretty unconventional for a government.
It sparked all sorts of conversations about digital currencies.
Like, what role would they play in the future of finance?
Exactly. And then there's climate change.
A completely different approach from his predecessor.
Oh, yeah. He wanted to roll back a lot of those environmental regulations.
Really going in the opposite direction.
His focus was on American energy, boosting fossil fuels.
Even with all the concerns about climate change.
He saw it as a path to energy independence.
So energy dominance over environmental protection.
Basically.
Yeah.
A lot of pushback from environmental groups, obviously.
But also support from the fossil fuel industry.
A divisive issue for sure.
And we can't forget about the Capitol riot.
A dark day for American democracy.
Trump's plans for dealing with that were controversial, to say the least.
He wanted to pardon those involved in the attack.
Many people saw that as downplaying what happened.
And further dividing the country.
A lot of questions about accountability.
And the rule of law.
We're just laying out the information here, not taking sides.
Of course, these are complex issues.
Many different perspectives.
It's about understanding the context.
So you can form your own opinions.
And engage with these topics thoughtfully.
And speaking of shifting gears, let's get back to inaugurations themselves.
Back to the ceremony.
It's interesting that Trump skipped Biden's inauguration in 2021.
He wasn't the first to do that, though.
Oh, who else?
John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Johnson. They all skipped their successors.
I wonder why. Personal grudges, maybe.
Or political differences, who knows?
Interesting to think about.
Definitely. But hey, let's lighten things up a bit.
Sounds good to me.
Let's dive into some inauguration trivia.
Fun fact.
Those little details that tell you so much.
Exactly. So, Bibles. Turns out, not all presidents used one.
Nope. John Quincy Adams used a law book.
Symbolizing his commitment to the Constitution.
Exactly. Pierce used one too. LBJ used a Catholic missal.
Reflecting his faith.
And Teddy Roosevelt. No book at all.
A true maverick.
It's fascinating how those choices reflect their beliefs.
And the role of religion in America.
Changing over time.
But when they did use a Bible, there were a few favorites.
Like the Washington Bible, used for his first inauguration.
And by many others since.
And then there's the Lincoln Bible, used by Lincoln, Obama, and Trump.
Wow, talk about historical significance.
Imagine the stories those pages could tell.
And speaking of stories, I love the one about Teddy Roosevelt at his 1905 inauguration.
What's that?
He wore one of Lincoln's rings, passed down from Lincoln's secretary.
A connection to the past.
Like a symbol of the presidency's legacy.
Those personal touches can be so powerful.
Absolutely. Now, one last quirky fact before we wrap up this part.
Hit me with it.
It's about Zachary Taylor, our 12th president, and his inauguration in 1849.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
So, Taylor was a very religious man.
And his inauguration fell on a Sunday.
Oh.
And he refused to be sworn in on a Sunday.
So what did they do?
Well, it gets tricky here. Some people believe that the president pro tempore of the Senate, a guy named David Rice Atchison,
Okay.
might have actually been president for that day.
Wait, what? A president for a day?
It depends on how you interpret the Constitution.
A constitutional puzzle.
And there's no easy answer.
But it's a great story.
It makes you think about all the weird things that can happen in history.
And how power transitions can be more complicated than we think.
Definitely. So we'll leave you with that mind-boggling story for now
In part 2, we'll explore more about this president for a day.
and delve deeper into Trump's Day One plans.
So stay tuned. A president for a day, huh?
It's a story that just grabs you.
But was he really president, even for those 24 hours?
It's a tough one. The Constitution isn't crystal clear on this kind of situation.
I see. So what are the arguments?
Well, some folks say that since he was the president pro tempore of the Senate, Atchison just automatically stepped in.
When Taylor wouldn't take the oath on Sunday, right?
Exactly. It's like the natural line of succession.
But I bet there's another side to this.
Oh, there is. Some say the presidency was just empty that day.
Like nobody was officially in charge until Taylor took the oath.
It all boils down to how you interpret the Constitution in this specific case.
History isn't always black and white, is it?
Nope. Lots of gray areas. That's what makes it so interesting.
So we might never know for sure if Atchison was truly president.
But it makes you think about how even our oldest systems can be tested.
And how much those little details matter.
Absolutely. Speaking of things that have changed over time, let's talk about technology and inaugurations again.
Yeah, we touched on it, but it's worth exploring further.
I mean, think about it. The way we experience these events has totally transformed.
From those early photos to live streams, it's mind-blowing.
And it's not just about seeing it. It's about how technology shapes our memory of those moments.
Like JFK's inauguration captured on film or Obama's broadcast to the whole world.
Those images become part of our shared history.
And who knows what future inaugurations will look like.
Virtual reality, holograms.
Imagine, it could be totally immersive.
The possibilities are endless. But for now, let's switch gears a little.
Okay, what's next?
Let's talk about the symbolism behind inauguration.
Oh, I love this part. It's those little details that speak volumes.
Like Washington's brown suit,
A
remember?
deliberate choice, not wanting to look like a king.
A symbol of humility, a new kind of leader.
And it's not just clothes, it's everything.
The location, the music, the guests, the words spoken.
It's all carefully planned to send a message.
It's like a performance on a grand scale.
And the audience is the whole nation, even the world.
It shapes how people see the new president, the direction of the country.
It's about so much more than just the ceremony itself.
It's about communication, power, creating a lasting impression.
And it's up to us to pay attention, to analyze what we see,
To think critically about those messages.
and have those important conversations.
Exactly. We've covered a lot in this deep dive, haven't we?
From history to traditions, quirks to symbolism,
But one thing remains constant.
the peaceful transfer of power.
The foundation of American democracy.
It's bigger than any one president or party,
It's about our shared history, our values.
and the hope for the future,
Each inauguration is unique, but they all represent that unity.
and the promise of a fresh start.
Before we move on to Trump's Day One agenda, I'm curious,
What about?
is there any inauguration that stands out to you as especially memorable?
Tough question. There are so many.
For me, it's Lincoln's second inauguration in 1865.
Right after the Civil War.
Such a powerful moment, the nation trying to heal.
And Lincoln's words, malice toward none, still resonate today.
Powerful stuff. What about you? Any that stick with you?
I'd have to say Obama's first inauguration, 2008.
I was there. The energy was electric.
It felt like a true turning point for America.
A new era.
And those are the inaugurations that really stay with us.
Ones that capture the spirit of the time.
The hopes and dreams of a nation.
Exactly. And speaking of hopes and dreams, we're going to look at what Trump had planned for his first day back in office.
Those executive orders, they were meant to make a statement.
A vision for America.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive. All right, we're back, and it's time to dig into those day one plans.
Trump's executive orders, ready to go right from the start.
He wasn't wasting any time.
No, he wanted to make a splash, shake things up.
And executive orders, they give a president a lot of power.
That's for sure. They can bypass Congress altogether.
You get things done quickly.
But it can be risky, too.
Yeah, they can be controversial, lead to pushback.
It's a balancing act.
So, where did Trump focus his attention on day one?
Well, we already talked about immigration a bit.
Right, that Remain in Mexico policy was a big one.
A huge change, making asylum seekers wait in Mexico.
Lots of debate about that, humanitarian concerns and all.
And legal challenges, too. It was messy.
And border security was a big theme as well, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. He wanted to make the border tougher, but the details were kind of fuzzy.
Just a general idea, more security, less immigration.
But then he brought up ending birthright citizenship.
Whoa, That's a big one.
Massive.
Well,
Huge legal hurdles, not to mention the political fight.
and what about the economy? I remember all the talk about America first.
Oh, yeah, that was a cornerstone of his platform.
And his executive orders aim to put those words into action.
Protecting American businesses, bringing back jobs.
Tariffs were a big part of that, weren't they?
Big time. He loved slapping tariffs on imports, especially from China.
Trying to level the playing field, he called it.
But a lot of folks worried those tariffs would hurt American consumers in the end.
And then there's that Bitcoin thing. Still can't believe that one.
The federal Bitcoin stockpile. Out of left field, right?
Nobody saw that coming.
But it showed he was paying attention to crypto, that whole new world of finance.
Maybe a little ahead of his time.
Perhaps. And then we've got climate change, a totally different approach.
A complete 180 from the previous administration.
He was all about rolling back those environmental regulations.
Promoting fossil fuels, energy independence.
Energy dominance, that was his slogan.
But lots of pushback from environmental groups, obviously.
They saw it as a step backward, ignoring the climate crisis.
And then there's the Capitol riot, a dark moment in our history.
A real test of our democracy.
And Trump's planned response was controversial, to say the least.
Pardons for those involved in the attack.
Some people were outraged. They saw it as letting people off the hook.
Ignoring the severity of what happened.
It raised questions about justice, accountability.
And whether he was putting his own interests above the country's.
Now, it's important to say we're not taking sides here.
No, we're just presenting the information, the different viewpoints.
These are complex issues, no easy answers.
It's up to each person to decide what they think is right.
To engage with these topics, do their own research.
And come to their own conclusions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into inaugurations,
it's more than just those ceremonies, the speeches, the fancy clothes.
it's about the choices a president makes, the direction they set for the country.
Those first 100 days, they're crucial.
And executive orders, they're a powerful tool for making those choices.
They can be used for good, or they can be misused.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in holding our leaders accountable.
To make sure they're working for the people, not just for themselves.
And that's what this deep dive is all about.
Encouraging you to think critically, to question, to engage with the big issues.
And to keep learning, keep exploring.
Because there's always more to discover.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic.
Until then, stay curious.